Hello, 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 and welcome to Coffee with the Carter Man. Mm, that is great, but actually today, full disclosure, it's it's actually Diet Pepsi today instead of coffee because it was handy and I love it. Um, I would actually pass the Pepsi taste. I can differentiate between Pepsi and Coke, but that's not what our show's about. Today, we have an incredible podcast for you. Absolutely incredible. First of all, before I even go into any further about what we're looking forward to, let me say happy Veterans Day to the many veterans we have watching, those who did serve and those who are serving. Thank you, thank you, thank you from the bottom of our hearts for your sacrifice for our country. We deeply appreciate it. And that brings me to the fact that we're going to have an interview with a genuine veteran American hero. Okay. I promise you. Now, he's going to deny it, but it's true. And when I introduce him, you'll know why. Okay. And as we talk about it, you will know why. And he's an incredible person. Very dear friend of mine for almost 8 years now, and soon to be a friend of yours. I promise you that. Okay. Then in our predictions, I'm not going to tell you what the predictions are, but we're going to bring in Gary and a new assistant producer, Chad. Sam is not with us at this point. Maybe he'll join us later for our prediction session at the end. But first, before we go to the interview, and that's going to be the bulk of the program, because I promise you, our interview guest today he is a genuine superstar in every respect, in business, in politics, um, and just in his personal life. Okay, a genuine superstar, someone that I admire greatly, and I think you soon will too. But before we get to the interview, just briefly, you know how we play the game, and we always start with my brief intro overview of where we are in politics. And let me show you where we are in politics because I think it's kind of important. Okay. Whoa, what is that? What does that say? That, by the way, is the Hanover newspaper, Hanover, Pennsylvania. Trump wins second term. And you were out there fighting for that and you won. You won. Okay. I know a lot of you who are watching right now worked hard for Trump, definitely voted for Trump, but you wouldn't be watching, obviously. Um, and now you have secured the victory. Okay. You have secured the victory. But okay, here we go. Here we go. But that's not enough. Okay. That's not enough because we won the battle and now we are into the war, kind of like out of the frying pan into the fire. Okay. And I want to be very explicit about this. Okay. I am not one of those who now says it's time to be conciliatory. It's time to hold out the olive branch. I was a history major in college and we studied some Second World War, pretty important part of our history. And I remember when the Japanese surrendered to aboard the USS Missouri. There was General MacArthur accepting the surrender, and I don't recall him saying to Hirohito or Hirohito's representative, "Well, no hard feelings. Let's just have some unity." No, there were hard feelings, and with us who just won the battle to put Trump back in the White House, we cannot now become complacent. Okay. I'm not going to go on forever about this, but it's vitally important. We cannot give any sort of ear at all to those who are saying to us, well, it's time now to have unity and to all become one again. Number one, we have unity. I did a TV show interview the other day, and the woman started pitching unity. And I said, wait, whoa, 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 whoa. And I'm afraid Donald Trump, because he's he says such nasty things, we won't be able to have unity. We have unity, okay? Trump has already brought us together. See this map? See the red? That's the Trump vote. That's called unity, okay? Those in the blue areas, I don't give a hoot in hell what they think. They lost. They voted for the most evil candidate in history. Frankly, a woman who was almost demonic. You don't cackle and chortle and put an abortion chamber outside the convention that nominates you without being a little bit strange, okay, a little extreme in the direction of, well, what was her quote to those who said, Jesus is Lord? Oh, you're at the wrong rally. And they were, okay? So for those who voted for her out there in the blue, I don't care what you think. We have unity. How much unity? Well, let's see. 40% of Latinos voted for Donald Trump. That's massive. That is massive. Okay. Here's one. Here's one. Whoa, who is that, Carter? Well, that's my little Honduran wife. Okay. I always tell people the only legal Honduran in America today, she voted for Donald Trump, as did 40% of her fellow Latinos, 30% of blacks, the highest in history. We've got unity. We've got unity. Okay. Now, I know some are saying, well, what about the 8 generations? Gen X, majority Trump. Gen Y, majority Trump. Even the millennials pulled themselves away from the front of their computers enough to vote majority for Trump. The only people that didn't were the baby boomers. Okay, the baby boomers. Okay, now I'm going to be unkind. Okay, and I can do this because I am a baby boomer. Let me check my clock. I don't want to go on forever about this. I'm a baby boomer, and people keep saying to me, well, why did your fellow baby boomers vote against Trump? Majority of them. The only age group that did. So let me tell you, as a baby boomer, I'm 78. All right, there were 3 reasons. One is they're the only people that still watch the damn mainstream media. Okay. The other age brackets don't watch the mainstream media anymore. So they were constantly fed lies, which they believed. I have a neighbor down the street who said, well, I'm voting against him because he touched that woman that came to his place. Well, I had to explain to her, number one, the woman who came to his place that the media said he touched, she said he touched, got the wrong year. He didn't even live where she said he was when she said he touched her. Number 2, she was there with Jeffrey Epstein. She was not exactly the Vestal Virgin who guards the sacred flame. Okay. And it was all a lie. But the boomers watch that stuff and soak it up. Number 2, they're senile. You say, Carter, that's not very nice. Yeah, I know it's not nice. You ought to be a baby boomer. Okay. You'd be stunned at how many of my friends really don't know whether they're a poached egg or a potted plant. Okay. I'm sorry. There's a lot of senility. I worry about it every day. If I forget my keys, I think, oh no, it started. It's just the way it is. Okay. And the third reason, jealousy. Okay. Jealousy. You'd be surprised how many people my age are jealous of Trump because he's our age. And it's like, well, I don't know how he can do all those things. Well, I don't know either, but he can. Okay. And they're jealous because they look at this guy. He's still going strong. He has a great life. They look back on their lives and wonder, where did it all go and why did I do something with it? And I'm sorry. It's just a fact of life, folks. It's just a fact of life. There are some among us who would get jealous. Me, I'm thrilled that he's my age and has that energy. I love Mick Jagger. I love Sylvester Stallone. I love Tom Selleck. Anybody my age is still going strong. I say, praise the Lord, let me follow suit. So there you have it. There you have it. We just won an incredible victory. And I'm going to tell you 2 things to watch for that are a measure of whether Trump is going to, this time around, not make the mistakes he made in his first term when he brought terrible people in. Okay. Watch and see if he brings Steve Bannon in. If he brings Steve in, then this time he is serious. Steve just the other day said about the Biden supporters and the Biden henchmen that threw him in jail, along with other Trump political operatives, tried to stick Trump in jail. Steve said to them, you don't deserve any respect, you don't deserve any empathy, and you don't deserve any pity for their loss. You deserve what we call rough Roman justice, and we're prepared to give it to you. So if he brings Steve in and keeps him in this time, that's a good sign. On the other hand, if he lets, I'm just going to say it, Kellyanne, if you see that Kellyanne Conway has come back in, we have a problem. Okay. She's a Washington insider. That's all she's ever been. She has no real loyalty to Trump. She allowed her husband to say the most vile things about Trump for 4 years. And somebody said, what do you mean allowed? Folks, I've been married 3 times. Let me tell you something. When your wife says, shut the hell up, you shut the hell up. Okay. I'm just telling you. And if you're a married man or the wife, you know it. So those are your 2 measures. He's brought in Homan already. He's going to shut the border. He's a tough guy. I've worked with Homan, Tom Homan. He's a tough guy. He's going to get the job done. And he said he's not bringing back in Nikki Haley. Good sign. And he's not bringing in the guy, the former CIA guy, whose name I can't remember now, but some of you remember. He was fat, now he's thin. That's all I can tell you. And thank God he's out. So there we go. There we go. There's my overview of the news for today. Again, rejoice. And again, I say rejoice, as St. Paul wrote, because we won the battle. Now let's fight the war and win the war at every turn. And to help in that area, to help us understand how to do that, is our guest today. Okay? Is our guest today. This is, I am promising you this is the single most impressive gentleman, and he is a gentleman, you are ever going to watch interviewed. Network television, podcasts, wherever you turn, and I'm not overstating it. By the time this interview is finished, you're going to say, Carter, you actually understated it. Okay? You're going to say you actually understated it. All right? And rather than have me introduce him, I want to play for you in just a second the introduction he was given when he was one of the featured guest speakers. And this was a tremendous honor at Duke University, where he attended. It was All-American in football. Distinguished speakers, they have a distinguished speaker series. And our guest today has been one of those, was interviewed, and it's an incredible interview at Duke. And here's the introduction that the young lady gave him, which is just perfect.
This is Duke University.
Good afternoon. It's my pleasure to welcome to you our final Distinguished Speaker Series of the year. We are fortunate to have with us today Mr. John McNabb, former chairman and CEO of Wilbur's Group. Mr. McNabb graduated from Duke University's College of Arts and Sciences in 1966 and served in the United States Air Force during the Vietnam conflict, having been awarded both the Air Medal with 3 oak leaf clusters and the Distinguished Flying Cross. Mr. McNabb returned to Duke to pursue his MBA, go Fuqua, and is an emeritus member of Fuqua's Board of Visitors, where he served from 1997 to 2004. A veteran of both the military and the business world, Mr. McNabb has served on 8 public boards and approximately 30 private company boards during his career. In the early 90s, he founded Growth Capital Partners, an investment banking firm that provided financial advisory services to both private and public middle market companies. In 2011, he sold the company to Duff & Phelps, a leading global provider of financial advisory and investment banking services to clients in North America, Europe, and Asia. Most recently, Mr. McNabb served as executive chairman of Wilbur's Group, a best-in-class infrastructure, construction, and maintenance company for the energy industry. Prior to last November's presidential election, Mr. McNabb served as key player in developing and running the Trump Leadership Council. In this role, he worked directly with business leaders across all industry sectors to help identify key problems and solutions to restore the American economy and to put Americans back to work. We are fortunate to have such a distinguished Duke alumnus and business leader with us today. So please join me in welcoming Mr. John McNabb back to Fuqua.
What did I tell you? That, John, welcome to Coffee with the Carter Man. I'm impressed, and I think everybody out there is. So thank you for joining us. It's incredible. And you know, folks, this is a very modest guy. Let me tell you something she left out. This gentleman, and he is incredibly successful. Let me just say that. Incredibly, as you can just see, He also is the winner this year, 2024, the Horatio Alger Award, which is, I'm going to embarrass you again, John, bestowed upon exceptional leaders who have triumphed over adversity to achieve greatness. Greatness. What do you think of that, John?
I'm wondering how I got involved in that, but I think I a great personal friend, Harold Ham.
Well, it is just wonderful to see you. And I just want to talk about general conversation here. Okay, this isn't an interview. This is a conversation between two friends. And I am going to refer a lot to something that I'm going to urge everyone to put in their personal library, and that's your autobiography, A Nice Ride. Let me just say this. A Nice Ride is a great book, okay? It is a great book. It not only lays out how John went from rags to riches, literally, but it also is the best motivational book I've ever read, John. So thank you.
Thanks, Carl.
Thank you for that book. And, you know, John, as I'm reading the book and something jumped out at me, and then that I've always felt about you, and then you said it in your Duke interview. And I want to start with that, okay? Because I think it sums up what it is about you that makes it so, despite the fact that you are not in the income bracket of most of us out here, and you have been more successful than most of us at the highest possible levels, you're still one of us. And it's a quote from your interview when they asked you kind of like what motivates you in life. And your response was 5 words: I just care about people. Comment on that. Comment on what that has meant in your life, that guiding philosophy.
Well, I think God has a plan for each of us, Carter. And his plan turned into my purpose in life. And so I think leadership makes a huge difference in the world. I think we have a leadership void in the world. I lay that on political system in most countries where there is a political system instead of a dictatorship or an oligarchy. But making a difference does make a difference. And that's really what a leader does. And as I think about, I was thinking about that when I started writing this book. And by the way, I wrote the book for my family, not for making any money. It wasn't about that at all, because I didn't push the book at all. But it was fun writing. It took me 3. It's like about 370 pages of a lot of pictures.
Yeah.
Of family and friends. But my life turned out to be how it started. I mean, I didn't know what was going to happen, but I was the captain of the Little League team. I was captain of the Pony League team. I was captain of the West Virginia Colt League All-Star team that we were state champions. I was captain of football team, tennis team, wrestling team, you name it. And I sat back maybe 20 years ago and I thought, I wonder what happened. Why was that? And I can only attribute it to having some type of spark, a caring spark that evidently made a difference, because like when I became one of the captains of Duke football and then was picked the most valuable player by my fellow teammates, nobody else picked me. All the sports writers did for all this and all that. But just for MVP, it was my colleagues on the football team. And then I started thinking, well, it must be leadership. And that's how I got sort of involved in that. And then I taught it at the University of Houston. I've spoken about it in Europe and Asia, the Middle East. I was chairman of the board at the University of Houston, where I never attended, but I just love the place in a lot of ways. It's sort of, every man goes to the University of Houston, and they're all different colors, all different stripes. Wonderful place. I love teaching. I taught there for about 5 years, and it all got back to leadership. I mean, just how do you make a difference? And in 2016, when I got asked by Harold Ham to co-found the Trump Leadership Council, he must have seen a spark too, because I have been his, and I'm retired now because the company's private. But I was lead director of Continental for most of the last decade. And my colleagues kept voting me on to that lead directorship.
All right, John, let me interrupt here because I want to put something in perspective for people. A lot of times when you see someone who has made it to the pinnacle of success the way you have in the business world, they were born with a silver spoon in their mouth. You know, a lot of people don't realize Bill Gates was wealthy before Microsoft. His daddy was wealthy, okay? And that happens, you know, even Donald Trump, he started out, you know, pretty wealthy. Ted Turner, yeah. But you didn't. Well, you mentioned you were in the West Virginia Most Valuable Player, and you mentioned it flew by, but the word coal. You were just born to lower middle class working family in I think southern West Virginia, which is still damn poor, right?
That's correct. Yep, sure was. I remember. I guess there was such a capitalist business ethic in my whole family, and in that family there were a lot of coal people. 18 of my relatives died in coal mine accidents. My grandfather's brother was murdered in a coal mine fight with union versus coal operators.
Right.
And I started loading trucks at 2 a.m. in the morning when I was 10, 11 years old. And I worked in the summers. I punched the clock and put on a Rocky outfit, you know, the Rocky white outfit, white hat. And
Right.
worked in a freezer, grinding sausage and loading, sides of beef off the train tracks. And anyway, so I just grew up working. I knew about work. I knew about capitalism. I looked up very much to my mom and dad, who were capitalists. I don't think when I made my first gift to the Horatio Alger Society, I'm not sure that my mom and dad ever made that much money in their entire business career.
Incredible.
Ever.
Incredible. So you went from the coal mine. So you didn't work the coal, meat packing. I think you worked at a meat packing plant from the time you were 10 years old.
Every summer.
Every summer. Put yourself through college, went to Duke, great school, obviously, and they're All-American football player. What position?
I played a different position every year. Coach Murray was a wonderful man. He was a very tough man, but he was a Christian guy. He had great morals and great view of people. But I remember every time I came down campus, if I could see him, I'd hide. I literally would. But occasionally he would catch me. And the first thing he would do is, as I would reach my hand out to shake his hand, he'd grab my stomach to see if there was any body fat on me. I mean, that was, I loved the man, and I loved him way after he had retired. He was the first president of the American Coaches Association. And so he was a wonderful role model for me, but also Mike McGee. Mike was my coach at Duke. He was an All-American and an All-Pro football player with the St. Louis Cardinals. He played at Duke, undergraduate.
Right.
And when I ran the Los Angeles Marathon, Mike was the athletic director at University of Southern California. And
All
so
right.
I hung out with Mike and Ginger and Mike Garrett and his
You
wife.
had another coach you had. And when I read the book, it jumped out at me. Folks my age are going to say, holy mackerel. So that's where the guy ended up. I think your baseball coach, according to your book, was Enos Country Slaughter, right?
Yeah. Enos Slaughter. I'll tell you what we did. I was never a really highfalutin guy. I'm not today. I'm just who I am. But I can remember the guys in the equipment room and Country Enos Slaughter, who World Series winner.
Oh, yeah.
He hit a ball and scored from first base. He was on base and he ran all the way and slid in to win the World Series when he was with the.
He wouldn't stop. I mean, I think they even tried to. Yeah.
These guys would cook every lunch. And I had the only invitation as the football coach, and then later as an administrator, I'd come down and eat rabbit with them. These guys would go shoot a rabbit or whatever, or cook whatever they shot. And we'd sit around and talk about life and liberty. And I probably learned more from those gentlemen in the equipment room and in the training room in Enid Slaughter than I learned at Duke.
Well, I appreciate your sharing that, because he was just a fascinating character. I'll never forget the World Series. He wouldn't stop running. It was like the rest of the team is running. You got to stop. No, he wanted to score the winning run, and he did it in the World Series.
Actually, that third base coach will, stick the hands up.
Oh, yeah.
And they tried to stop it.
And that has been your philosophy of life. You just don't stop. You don't stop.
I haven't. That's right. I'm years old, and I'm not in politics anymore, and I'm happy with that. But I see people in politics. I see the president, Joe Biden. He's now celebrating Veterans Day, and we're the same age about. And I know I served. I know he didn't. So I don't know if he didn't serve, but I had to serve. I wanted to serve.
And you served in Vietnam. And I need to read this. It's Veterans Day. And I want to read this quote from your book that opens up your chapter on your Vietnam service. And I want to talk a little bit about the Vietnam service. Here's your quote. God bless our fallen heroes. To be clear, I am no hero. You are. But to be clear, I am no hero. Just a guy who served his country in harm's way. My heroes will always be with me. It is impossible to replace real heroes, real patriots. But John, you were a hero. You were decorated 4 different medals, including the Distinguished Flying Cross. I think you flew 56 missions over North Vietnam. Am I correct in that number?
I flew a total of 137.
I'm a little off.
No, but
Wow.
not all over North Vietnam. I didn't fly in South Vietnam. But most of our missions were in Laos on the Ho Chi Minh Trail, right on the border of North Vietnam. It was an active time, 24/7. It looked like the 4th of July every night. And I can remember a couple Christmases flying, a couple New Year's days and nights flying. And so I missed a lot of American history during that period of time. I was there for parts of 69, 70, and 71.
This was right after Duke, and you were in the thick of a fight that I think we Americans look back on it, and obviously it's a fight we ended up not winning, but that takes nothing from the 57,000 of your comrades who sacrificed their life, and you who put your life every day in harm's way. One of the stories, and to me it demonstrates, I think it demonstrates one of the ways that you have succeeded so much, because John Kennedy said that courage was grace under pressure. Okay. I think he was quoting Hemingway, and you may have even attributed it, but you had grace under pressure. And there was one incident in particular when you found yourself flying under B-52s, dropping bombs that in what you thought was your target, right?
I remember that. That was in North Vietnam, around the border with Laos, and it's really hostile country. There were no friendlies in that part of the world, and there were no Viet Cong. These were North Vietnamese regulars, and the Pathet Lao was the communist version of the North Vietnamese soldiers. The Pathet Lao were as vicious as the North Vietnamese. And if you think about this, just for a second to digress, I saw some friends die over there, watch their planes go down. I still remember their names, still remember them. That day it was they called it arc-light missions, and there would be cells of B-52s dropping 500, 750, and 1,000-pound bombs. And they weren't just powder bombing or carpet bombing population. They were really just hitting target sites, missile sites, and ammunition dumps, and also trying to just disrupt the Ho Chi Minh Trail, which was a dirt road. I mean, so they could go and hit that dirt road, and the next day you'd have 50,000 people out there digging around, women and men, and that thing was open again. It was just amazing. Wow. Anyway, that day, Rich Bear, and Rich has passed away. He died in a plane crash. Rich, Naval Academy, good guy. We were flying together, And I said, Rich, we got a problem. I said, we're underneath the bomb strike, the target strike. And he said, what do you want to do? And I said, we're not going to do anything. And he didn't say what, or that was the answer. And my feeling was, because this is real time now, we're talking about 5 seconds worth of thought. I just thought anything I could do would be the wrong move.
Wow.
So I just kind of took a deep breath and just kept on keeping on. But that's happened a couple other times as well.
And that's grace under pressure. That defines Hemingway's grace under pressure. And you exhibited obviously throughout your entire professional career. Now I want to get pretty soon up to the Trump Leadership Council, because that's fascinating. And most of our audience is very political. But tell us, how did that same philosophy, that same approach, that extremely steady hand serve you when you started with nothing and decided it's time for you? As you say in your book, I didn't want to work for anybody else. So you started out on your own and you made it to the top, John. How in the hell does somebody do that?
Over time, you make friends. And my thought is, you don't try to make friends, you make them. And how a friend is made is they come to you. They see you in action somehow, or helping somebody else. And so it's walk the walk instead of talk the talk. And, where you are up in DC, and that's why I don't want to be up there. And, we can talk about the job offers I had in the last, 2 administrations ago. But anyway, I just didn't want to go to DC. I didn't want to talk the talk. And we're doing that today. And I'm enjoying it. But so I just built a life of making a difference for other people, teaming up. Teamwork is big. Can be a hard ass at times when necessary, but only when necessary. And so one day, a friend of mine, a guy named Charlie Stevenson, who'd built a huge company, I was his lead director. And during that period of time, he said to me, one of these days, literally just out of the blue, I didn't ask him for anything. And I wasn't a guy that I don't ask for much. Don't need, right. I don't ask for much. And he said to me, one of these days, you're going to want to do what I did. And I thought, yeah, that's probably right. Yeah, I want to. And he said, so when it's time for you to go do your own thing, I want to help you. So I called him one day. We were onboarding a guy named Rex Adams, who was a West Virginia coal mine boy who played at Duke and just passed away. He was an EVP at Mobile, Rhodes Scholar, went to Merton College at Oxford. And he grew up with a dad who had black lung, who passed away. The dad was also a sheriff in a little town called Oak Hill. And he watched his mom work so hard to keep the family. And Rex went to play football at Duke, just like I did. And then he later became chairman of PBS, and an amazing bunch of honors. And so, Rex and I were going to hire a new director, and we were going to talk to Charlie about that in Falls Church, Virginia. I think it was the, I'm trying to think, one of the nice hotels in Falls Church. Anyway.
Right.
And, so I told Charlie after we met with Rex, we were trying to onboard him rather. And I said, I think it's time. And so we shook hands on a deal, and it was a big number on a handshake. And the company was me and a partner named Dave Sargent, 2 people. That was the company. And I said, so what's the deal? And he said, well, I want 25% of the company. And I'm going to this is going to be debt till you can earn some equity, till you actually build a business. And I want 10% interest on that. So I made a deal, 2 people, and this was a large amount of money on a handshake. So we got to work and built a dang good business, sold it to Duff and Phelps. But in the meantime, I was on like 8 public boards.
Now this was oil industry, right? This was the oil industry, right?
Oil and gas. And I'll say, I've been in the drilling business. I've been in the manufacturing business. I've been in the service business and the E&P business. So I built pipelines. Wilbros was one of the largest pipeline builders in the world
Wow.
over
That
the
was
years.
your company. That's your company.
Yeah, I was chairman and CEO. Good question though, Carter. It's just, how do people do things? Well, I
Yeah.
think you don't do things with a purpose necessarily. Your purpose may be just, I want to feed my family.
Right.
I want to make a difference. But it's, you're not a campaigner. I'm not that you are, but it's so different than politics.
Yes.
I mean, the Democrats paid, some of these ladies and guys, $20 million to show up for them. $20 million.
Yeah.
I mean,
Oh,
think
yeah.
what it's done for people instead
Yeah.
of Oprah and whatever else.
That's right. That's exactly right. So with in the oil industry, that whole scenario, that's where you met Harold Hamm, who I think is like one of the third, fourth, fifth richest man in the world, I believe, very high up there.
Wonderful
And
guy.
what'd you say?
He's a wonderful guy that got his first pair of shoes when he was 6 years old.
Wow.
And he grew up with 12 brothers and sisters in a 2-bedroom house. 12 brothers and sisters, a mom and a dad, with no running water or electricity. And that's how he grew up. And we met
Wow.
on a Dickey's barbecue, and we each had a Diet Coke or an iced tea, whatever. And he said, John, I want to talk to you a little bit. And so we talked, and he said, shook my hand. He said, you'll do just fine.
You do just fine.
Hands left. He had to go to a board meeting. and I thought, well, I did just, that was good. It never hurt. And then 3 months or 4 months later, he called me and said, John, I want you to join this board. He had a pipeline company as well.
Right.
And I became kind of leader of that eventually, and then sold it. I actually built part of the last pipeline that he was building. And also I did 2 or 3 things for that company because I still had businesses while I was on this board. I wasn't running anything anymore. I was just doing things. And,
Right.
And so he's been a great personal friend. He still is. We're very close. He's still involved in in this rendition of the Trump transition.
Right.
He'll make a real. And listen to me. I'm 80. I can go after this and go eat sushi or get some egg rolls or a little sake for lunch. I really don't want to be involved in the political life of the country anymore. It's not. I'm past that, and really don't want to do that.
I understand, but you were, and let's get to that. You were in 2016. Harold Hamm, the gentleman you were just talking about, came to you and said, we're forming the Trump Leadership Council to advise Trump on business. And I want to get into what it actually did. And I want you to be my co-chair. Tell us, was it out of the blue? All of a sudden he comes to you with that?
Blue. I was coming in for a board meeting. I was on the Continental Resources Board. And one of the guys had, an earplug in, and he said, Mr. Hamm wants to see you. And I had no idea what that was about. And, I thought, well, I think I've been a good director, so I don't think he wants to get rid of me, but he could,
Right, right.
So I come in, and then really wonderful people, Kristen Thomas and Blue Halsey, the PR and the government people for Harold that are still working with him. They came in, and I'm looking around, and he said, I said, well, what's up? And he said, I want you to get involved with Donald Trump. And this has been public before. And I said, well, I don't think I want to do that. And he looked at me, what? And then the next thing he said was, well, who are you voting for? And I said, well, Harold, I'm not voting for Hillary. Now, this is 2016, early before the spring. So this is real early. And, I just said some of the tweets and this and that, and I didn't know Donald Trump at that time like I know him now. And so all I knew was the tweets and things. And he said, well, you know what? You need to think about this overnight. And so I, all night long, I was thinking about it, is Harold going to fire me from the board? What's he going to do? Going to throw me out of the office or whatever? And of course, he wouldn't have done that. But anyway, I came in the next morning and all three of them again. And I said, I thought about this and I'm in. And I told him, here's what I'll do. I'll help you recruit the leadership council, which was very important. And I'll run the meetings. And he said, that's exactly what I wanted you to do.
Excellent.
And he and I have been on for, it's 20 years. And we're still very close, even though I'm not involved. I'm on his board at Oklahoma State, the Ham Institute for American Energy. And I just got off one of the other boards. I'm trying to just deboard. At 80, I'd rather just walk the dog around the lake.
Yep, I understand. Let me ask you this. All right, let me cut to the nitty gritty here. We've just heard from Kamala Harris and all the Democrats and the mainstream media day after day. Donald Trump is Hitler. He's a fascist. He's the worst person in the world since Genghis Khan. He's vile. He's ill-behaved. But I read your book, and I want to give you a quote after, I think this was after your first meeting with you. And you wrote in your book, okay, folks, here we go. Get this book. You wrote in your book, the Donald Trump I know is charming, quiet, a great listener, and smart as a whip. Kind of a contrast there. So which is it?
Now, but I would say, and I don't know how I would have handled that. I've been shot at a few times, unfortunately missed, but he's been shot at for years.
Yeah.
I mean, literally now shot at for a year. I mean, and I think Iran's not going to stop.
No.
And as you know, I'm very close to the Middle East, especially with the Israeli government, who I love the Israelis, very close with them.
Yeah.
But he's just an interesting guy. The thing that people don't know about Donald Trump, he's a great listener, and he is smart as a whip. And so what you see with him is you'll watch him, and a lot of times when you see him when he's not talking, you'll see him kind of click his head a little bit this way or tilt it, and he's really taking it in. And I'll tell you how smart Donald Trump is, J.D. Vance. And people say, who's this guy? What's all this about? This and that. And J.D. Vance is just tougher than an old shoe. He's smart as can be. He's a very good guy. And he didn't grow up very far from me. He grew up in a tough part of Ohio that wasn't dissimilar from where I grew up in West Virginia.
Yeah. Well, in meetings with Trump, was he acerbic? Did he say nasty things to people? Because, I mean, that the image the media has created,
Zero. Polite, calm, collected. I'll tell you what, I just put a picture on Facebook. I've learned about Facebook. I'm having fun with it, and I'll probably get off of it the next 3 or 4 days, whatever. I put a picture of the first Trump Leadership Council meeting in the Trump Tower in his boardroom in New York City. And there's a picture with me on his left. He's on my right. And I think it was, I'm trying to think, it was the former, Tim Pawlenty, who was former governor of Minnesota. And he was involved, we had committees. We formed committees on the council. And Tim ran banking and finance. And if you look at that picture, you'll see Donald Trump going, just listening to what Pawlenty was saying about, the different things that Democrats are trying to do in the Senate and the House.
Right.
So he's a listener. He's smart as a whip. He catches on quick. I don't think the transition first time was very good.
Terrible.
It just wasn't. And that's not to say that they probably wouldn't have asked me to go on to different committees or cabinet positions. I still think that they knew what they were doing with me. But anyway, that's a joke. But anyway, it's very different this time. And Harold Ham is on the transition team.
Great.
And he needs to be. This thing of getting the Tesla guy involved, amazing. Incredibly smart. This guy is smart. And he's putting a tough team together. And he needs to have that team.
He's got to
because
have that.
we're going
Got to
to
have
see,
that team this time. Let
yeah,
me ask you.
see a lot of things happen in this country. I'm not talking
Yeah,
about war in the country, but you already seen what's happened with the Dow. You've already seen that Hamas now wants a break.
right,
Interesting.
right.
And I don't know what about all these creeps on the campuses, what they're going to do with the Soros money or wherever that money's coming from. Maybe coming from China or Russia.
Could be, could be.
I
Yeah,
don't know. But Trump, he'll do a great job this time. He needs to get some more protection. I watched the Butler thing,
yeah.
and I watched what happened. And I've been involved with the Secret Service since I actually did work for Carter. I was in the Carter White,
That's right.
but not in the White House. But I was doing advanced work for Carter. And Mobil at the time, I was with Mobil Oil. They thought that was great. Here's a guy who's going to work for a Democrat, because they were hammering on big oil back then, even.
Oh yeah.
And so I just think he's going to take care of business. If you think about talking to Putin, Putin does know. The neat thing about Trump, and one of the reasons I think I had a little success in business, is, I'm talk a lot and laugh and giggle, and people will get to thinking, well, who is this guy? Well, I already knew what I was.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so it would be real fun. And I would be folksy and talking this and that. And I knew where I wanted to go and got there most all the time. So I get people kind of loose and giggly about things, but I'll won most of the time. And Trump does too. And so what he does, he presents a picture that Putin really doesn't understand. The Chinese understand less of this. The Chinese have their own problems economically. Xi has got real problems there politically and economically. And there are an awful lot of Chinese living really like animals all
Yes.
over that
Yeah.
country. And I did some work with the Chinese government, the Chinese oil company in the past. I did some training for them in Dubai, as a matter of fact. So I got to know the Chinese a little bit. But Trump's got a lot of tailwind now. And he'll be very judicious in how he uses power. If you think about power, we're worried about the end of democracy and all this. I'm a fascist. I'm garbage. Biden wants to smack me in the ass, quote. Are you kidding me? I mean, ridiculous. So I think he's putting a great team together.
Well, I am thrilled to hear that because we had terrible problems last time. You recall, a lot of people don't realize this, but Mitch McConnell and Paul Ryan, the Thursday after Trump got into office, went to him and blackmailed him. They told him, we're going to block every piece of legislation you present if you don't let us choose who's going to be in your administration. And they chose the worst people possible. And
Well,
this
yeah.
time around, thank God. And I'll be honest with you, I wish, and we got to draw to a close, even though I have one more question. I wish you would get more involved, John, because I think, look, everybody now has seen not only your knowledge, but your wisdom. And I think Trump needs that. He needs that kind of guiding hand. And I hope Harold Hamm calls you again and tells you to get over here.
Harold and I talked yesterday. He's fine. And I made it clear to a lot of folks that I'm done. I mean, at some point, I'm not done at 80, but I'm done. I remember a conversation. I was at the Greenbrier with my wife and a couple of daughters and their children. And I got a phone call from a no-name person. And he said, let's have lunch. And I said, sure. I'll be a friend of mine in a big position in D.C. He said, well, I told him, I said, I'm not going to come up there, but when I have time, I'll come up. And he said, let's just the Capitol Hill Club. I said, fine. And he said, I really want you to come now. And I said, is this pleasure? Because if it's pleasure, I may fly up in a couple of months. He said, this is business. So I go up there, no names again. And they verbally offer me a choice cabinet position. This was the second one they offered me. And I can go through the first one real quick. But anyway, I said, so I may do this if it's an appointment. but I'm not going to go through this raggedy tag thing, to get the confirmation and all.
Right.
And the quote was, I will mention this guy's name, McConnell won't do that.
Oh, for God's sake.
And so I've never been a McConnell fan.
No.
The sad thing about what's going on is we need term limits on
Yes.
every term limits. And the president has term limits. I mean, if you can get elected twice in 2 consecutive terms, good for you. But typically it doesn't happen. And so I think term limits will make a huge difference. I'm not sure where Paul Ryan fits this time. I'll mention his name. I think he's in La La Land.
Oh,
He's
yeah.
aware.
Yep.
Because he
Yep.
made a mistake.
And he went over to Fox and steered it against Trump. I mean, there's just no doubt. We know that. We know the kind of person he is. But if in closing, because I think we need this from you. I think we need this from you, okay? As I've said, and I've read your book, I read it totally through and I've studied it, John. I've studied it, and it is, to me, I love How to Win Friends and Influence People. I love Napoleon Hill's Think and Grow Rich. But in terms of motivation and instruction on how to live your life, I think this book is right up there with those two, okay? And in the book, you say, Beverly Hills was quoted as saying, there are no shortcuts to any place worth going. And that's when you said it was time for you to make a difference. And you say, and I want you to comment in closing on this, quote, this is from the book, you can program your subconscious for success. If you are intentional about your thoughts and goals, they can be realized. The choice is yours.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, I can't, and most people don't get the guidance at home. I wonder if we don't have a parenting problem in the country now. And I don't know if it's 30% of the population. Forget silos. I'm not talking about silos, but I think I really think this open information that we have, the internet, has been a real damage to society too, and civilization. It's been a wonderful help, but it's also a negative. And I think you can't program yourself for success. You have to know who you are. And that's what I did. I flew my plane down to the border, went into the Chizos Mountains where actually the Apache chieftain, trying to think of his name now, and I stayed up there for a couple of days, and I walked down to a cave, weirdly enough, and I sat down. This will sound really crazy. I sat in a cave for about 12 hours with my feet dangling over, actually looking at the river down there.
Right.
Right on the border with big mountains on the Mexican side. And I just thought about a lot of things. So I came back home and I put 20 things down about who am I? And I said a big prayer, told God that I wanted some help with this. And so nobody was ever going to see this. And I actually evaluated myself. I know this sounds really corny.
That's good.
And said, you know what? I'm going to change the way I live. And I did.
And you changed it to a person who, as you say, was very intentional, decided where you wanted to go, and you went there.
Right.
And I think that's an inspiration to all of us, John. So thank you. Thank you again as a veteran for your service to the country. Thank you for what you did in the first Trump administration, getting that together. And thank you for the person you are now.
Well, God bless you, Carter. You're a great American.
Well,
I love
thank you.
what you do, and keep on doing it.
All right. Thanks for joining us. I appreciate it. Fantastic. There you go, folks. I know that right now you are sitting there saying, wow, rarely do you get to hear from someone who, with his achievements, who has accomplished what he has, and yet is as down to earth and inspiring, frankly inspiring, as John McNabb. So I deeply appreciate having John join us. And we're going to try and have him on regularly, okay, for his wisdom and for his inspiration and for his knowledge as to where the country is and where it needs to go. All right. And now let's talk about where we think it's going to go. Let me bring my colleagues in, our producer, Gary, and our cohort, Chad, our assistant producer, Chad. And Sam's not with us, Gary.
It would appear Sam's not with us at the moment. I figure
right.
we could bring John back in. He's here. Let him sit through this.
All right.
We like everything John has to say anyway.
Absolutely.
Well, I'm here.
All right. We're going to do some predictions. All right. So I'm going to do 2 predictions and I want you guys to comment on them. Number 1, this is my prediction about, because of this election, the mainstream media. Okay.
I mean the legacy media, right? The legacy media.
Or as I call them, the lickspittle media, because they've been lickspittles for the hard left ever since I can remember.
Yeah.
And when I say I think they're done, I mean, I really believe by the end of 2025, you're going to see a radical change in the entire mainstream media structure, including the end of this woman's career.
Yeah.
Caitlin
God.
Look at the look on that face. She doesn't belong on network television. She belongs in a psychiatric ward. And right next to her should be this one, Kristen Welker. Look at that look. That's the look she adopts when she interviews conservatives. So I think these people have totally destroyed their credibility. I think, look, Jeff Bezos has already made it clear he is changing the structure of the Washington Post. Okay. Getting rid of the people like those two and bringing in people who respect objectivity. So what do you guys think? Am I on to this prediction? John, you go first. What do you think?
Well, I think that's right. As a matter of fact, when I met Beverly Sills, who is one of my heroes, and I'm not really into opera, although I do listen to it some because it's calming for me. I met Martha Graham at Duke at a big meeting, and I was involved, and it was the who's who in the world seemed to go to this thing. And Terry Sanford was the president of the school at that time at Duke. And I thought she was an interesting person. I mean, they were still sort of balanced at that point.
Right.
And her what was his name? The editor?
The Bradley.
Yeah, Bradley.
Yeah, Bradley, the Washington Post. Yeah, Bradley was the editor. Yeah.
All people. And as a matter of fact, I'll tell you a funny story. This is awful, but so I'm wearing jeans and boots, and everybody's got on, the finery, especially the women. They're all decked out, trying to outdo everybody else.
Right.
And I show up in cowboy boots and jeans, and I'm kind of a young guy at that time. And this young guy comes up to me, and he said, "You're wearing jeans." He said, I just didn't have the nerve. And, well, hi, I'm John. He said, "I'm Calvin Klein."
Oh my gosh.
But we're talking the creme de la creme at this thing. I mean, it was amazing. But I thought Martha Graham, and they had a tight hold on the Washington Post, but that's changed. The New York Times, I think the New York Times started going down when they blasted the lacrosse guys at Duke, actually.
Yes.
Yeah.
They doing some really stupid stuff. And I think with the podcast now, and Trump won the podcast. One of the young people, they're not out to watch ABC. Why would you do that?
Yep.
At this point. So I think the funding for these things are going to start drying up. That's my opinion. And I think they'll play less of a role. And listen, they were a monopoly growing when we grew up, Carter.
Oh, absolutely. Total monopoly.
You are correct. You are correct.
Yep. Yeah, Gary, what do you think? What's your?
I think John's assessment's accurate. Personally, I think because they've been a monopoly so long, and some of the age demographics of the people running the show at these companies, they think they're good, indefinitely good, and that they'll be around. But then you just look back at the simple decisions they have made. A great example of this is CNN when they made CNN Plus. Rather than to come to somebody like me or Chad and say, "Hey, how do we do this? How do we make this transition?" and probably Christ, it'd probably cost them a couple grand. Literally, that's what we charge. They decide they're going to go with the guys who handled TV networks for 50 years and pay billions, $2 billion to be exact, to found their internet persona. Well, that literally died in a week.
Wow.
In a week, they lost $2 billion.
In
It's
a
not a
week,
tough
I love it.
transition. It's amazing to me that happened the way it did.
Yeah.
So yeah, they're dying. They're going to disappear. And any of the smart ones are getting off the train early. I mean, a great example of that. I never liked the guy Chris Cuomo, but as things have progressed in the direction they're going, now you're seeing Chris Cuomo with a different attitude, a different perspective, and he's putting himself on the internet and sharing himself that way. So some of these younger people are getting on the right track to try to save their careers. But all the older folks, man, they're just going to be left with an empty bag and wondering where it all went. That's what's coming.
All right, Chad, give us your take.
Well, nothing stands out more than the idea that CNN has been for sale for how long, and nobody is interested because it's a dying industry. So why would you buy something that's dying? You got podcasts that are getting thousands and hundreds of thousands of more views than any mainstream media network these days. There's no question. You're hearing from real people on podcasts. You're not hearing from people who are paid to give an opinion. You know, there's so many different things I could say about this, but just look, you know, he mentioned Chris Cuomo, and Cuomo did a good thing, not only by going to, he went to like News Nation, I believe. Not only doing that, but also becoming friends with Patrick Bet-David.
Absolutely.
Who Patrick Bet-David gave Chris Cuomo his career back, because
Absolutely.
otherwise he would no longer be relevant and nobody would care.
John, that's a show John needs to go on. Patrick Bet-David.
Oh, without question.
That is perfect for you. He is a businessman. You talk the same language.
Yep.
That's a good one. Yeah.
That would be an excellent show. And if you had the opportunity, that's one to go on, tell your story. And Patrick is incredible. That's one of my favorite shows on right now. And then if we look the other direction, we look at Don Lemon. Look at Don Lemon left CNN. He thought he was going to do something, talking to Elon, and look at that disaster of an interview he had with Elon Musk. Absolute disaster. And Elon Musk ate his lunch. And after that interview, he was no longer welcome to have his show on X.
Nobody touched it.
Nothing shows more than exactly what is happening.
Well,
all right.
A lot of that's complacency. So these people are so complacent in the narrative that they have been pushing for so long that they believe it themselves.
Yep.
And the confirmation bias that comes out when they're giving an interview, it's a downward spiral that they themselves are responsible for. And Don Lemon is a perfect example, because if you saw him on the boardwalk in Atlantic City last month, he's interviewing people on the street, and he says to this man, he says, well, why are you voting for Trump? And the guy says, well, because of the economy. Don Lemon looks this man in the face and said, well, no, you're wrong. The economy's good. What are you doing, man? Like, you're going to tell the man to his face that he's not going through what he is in fact going through right now? There's just too much of a disconnect. It really is.
All right, folks, as much as I hate to do it, we like to keep to an hour. We're a little over, so we're not even going to do our next prediction. We'll save it for next week. John, thank you very, very much. Gary, Chad, and folks, make sure to tune in next week when we will do it again. And I promise you we will have John back on soon. Let's do this thing.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much, John.